Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I am Marc Givler. Changing it up today a little bit. We got Tony Gerdeman here, BuckeyeHuddle.com lead team writer. Tony, I won't do the power pause, but I will ask you, how's it going?
Mark, it's going well.
How
are you doing?
Yes, I'm doing well. Are you enjoying your off season here? Your prolonged off season with the late spring ball start?
I'm looking at it, and we are just 4 weeks away from spring practice after having about 4 weeks off from the national championship game. So I'm right in the sweet spot of it, and but still, there's always football to talk about. There's always the beast that needs to be fed.
That's right. This is a recruiting show, and we are talking about recruiting with Tony here, but I felt this was a good time to bring Tony on because of our topic today. We are going to look at the 5 true freshmen that we expect to make the biggest impact on the field this fall, the 2025 season for the Buckeyes. This is not a best players in the class necessarily. It is not a projection of what they will look like in 3 years necessarily. This is a who will get out there early enough based on their ability and opportunity available. We're going to go from 5 to 1. We have some similarities, but we have some differences as well on our list. So let's get right into it at number 5. Tony, who's your number 5?
Yeah, I went with defensive end Zion Grady because, one, he's talented, as we know. Larry Johnson mentioned back at one of the bowl practices that the quote is, "We're counting on him to get ready early." And then when you look at the depth chart right now, you've obviously lost Mitchell Melton, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. So you've gotten very, very young there. You've brought in Zion Grady, Epi Cicinelli, and I'll get that wrong. I think he's going to probably take some time. He's a little thin right now, in my opinion. So they're going to have to build him up. But Joshua Mickens did not play much last year as a redshirt freshman. Is he going to be able to hold off Zion? And then they're bringing in Logan George from Idaho State, who we'll see what happens with him. Dominic Kirks is there as well. What happens with CJ Hicks? There are a lot of questions here, but I went ahead and went with this guy because it's not unusual to see a freshman defensive end come in and make an impact. And when we say impact, I think a lot of this is relative as well. I just finished writing about or talking about Edric Houston for another video, and he ended up as the number 2-3 tech behind Tyleik Williams. That's a big impact. He only had 7 tackles. Well, that's no impact. So these things are all kind of relative, and I think he can have something similar. And you've seen some very talented defensive ends. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau as true freshmen made an impact. JT Tuimoloau started a couple games as a true freshman. Zach Harrison before that started games as a true freshman. And of course, I'm not going to get into the Chase Youngs and the Bosas, but there you go. Defensive end, freshman Zion Grady.
Yeah, that's a good pick, and I'll kind of get into my thoughts on him later in the show. My number 5 is the guy who I think is probably, if not the most physically ready, one of the 2 or 3 most physically ready. It's wide receiver Quincy Porter. I went back and forth on this because on one hand, I think people are going to be able to look at that and say, well, is a true freshman wide receiver really going to crack this lineup? And no, he's not going to start, but they do have some numbers things at receiver right now. They are not the days of Urban Meyer and, having 13 receivers on the roster has not been Ohio State's thing the last few years. I think he's the most ready of the true freshman receivers. I think he's, at 6'3", 195-ish, maybe even 200 pounds. I think he gives them a kind of a different dynamic than a lot of the other receivers on this roster, not named Jeremiah Smith. And so I think it's a natural fit, as I think everyone on this planet knows that Jeremiah Smith is not going to be at Ohio State for 4 years. I think it's a natural progression to sort of push him behind Jeremiah Smith early and just soak it in, buddy. Learn from Jeremiah Smith, learn that position. and get ready to go, and maybe get ready to, with Jeremiah maybe being on a pitch count at certain games this year, getting Quincy Porter into some games, catching some passes, and especially late in games when they're up, and getting him into the fold. But I think this guy's a legitimate 5-star talent. I think he's a stud. I think he's their next great receiver after they cycle through this other, Carnell Tate and Jeremiah, and I think Mylan Graham is going to eventually ascend to that. But I think he's the next guy in line. And so I think, and I had to put someone from all,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to give away the whole thing here, but like it was hard on offense. It was much easier, I think, on defense to find opportunity. So this is where I went with number 5.
Yeah, and that's my number 4, Quincy Porter. And I'm with you. When you're trying to find guys on offense, like I can see a world where everybody on offense red shirts this year. Doesn't mean they won't play, but they can get their 4 games, and then whatever happens in the playoffs. Because we even saw true freshmen playing in the playoffs after not really playing in the regular season because of the blowouts. But yeah, I'm with you. I like everything about Quincy Porter, and I like the depth chart too, because I can see him coming in and being Jeremiah Smith's backup at X. And sure, they play different positions, and Carnell Tate will move around, and so will Jeremiah Smith, but Quincy Porter as that prototypical X who can just be behind Jeremiah Smith and learn from him. And like you said, they're not going to be playing. He's not going to be needing to be out there 60, 65 snaps, Jeremiah Smith. So there's going to be an opportunity. And this is a guy who's big. He can do stuff after the catch. He's not just like a possession receiver. Like I've jokingly said on the Buckeye Weekly podcast and Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, he's somewhere between Marvin Harrison and Jeremiah Smith. It's like, that's totally unfair. But like, this is I think the kind of player that we're talking about that, as you said, is the next big time receiver once it's his turn. And being here for spring practice is huge, because I think that's one of the things that set Mylan Graham back. And had he been here in the spring and the winter rather than June, probably would have seen more from him last year. But this is not a very deep room. And so there's going to be an opportunity for a guy like Quincy Porter to make some room.
Yeah, and I do kind of wonder, like, the next evolution of Jeremiah Smith is, in my opinion, that they're going to move him around, which will also create an opportunity there. May be able to get on the field with Jeremiah Smith at some point. So we'll see, but I think he's a guy who just jumps off the page to me as someone who could play early. So that was your number 4. Go with my number 4. I've got Riley Pettijohn, linebacker out of Texas. Just again, I go with college-ready bodies. He's fast. He's athletic. I think he's versatile. I think he's a guy that, you're not going to want to throw too much at him right away. I'm sure they're just going to kind of put him in one spot and let him learn one spot before he learns 2 or 3. But just strikes me as someone with the athleticism and the physical preparedness to get out there early. He's been with the team since December, went through bowl prep and things like that with the team. And again, I think he's a border, if not a legitimate 5-star, certainly right on the cusp of 5-star guy. For me, he's an easy top 50 type of prospect in the country. I know a lot of places did have him a 5-star. And so that was an easy one for me to get him on this list somewhere. Tony, I think you're going, we're at number 3 for you. I think we were staying on that side of the ball though, right?
Yeah, we are. And I will go with Jarquez Carter, defensive tackle, who, again, when we're talking about depth, right now Tyleik Williams is gone. I assume Jarquez Carter is going to be a 3-tech, even though Larry Johnson has compared him to Mike Hall, who is Larry Johnson's idea of what a nose tackle is so different than what a lot of people would have, because Robert Landers was a nose tackle and Mike Hall was a nose tackle, and that these are these quick 3-tech type of guys that can get upfield, and that's what Jarquez Carter is. The thing is, like, they need depth at defensive tackle, whichever spot, whether it's nose tackle or 3-tech. He's going to start out at 3-tech. That's what Larry Johnson has said, but then he's also compared him to Mike Hall, which is interesting. But when you look at the depth chart at 3-tech, you've got Edric Houston, who stepped in and moved from defensive end to defensive tackle mid-season and then became the backup. Mm-hmm. So that says a lot of good things about him, but what does it say about the guys behind him? And does that mean that Jarquez Carter is going to have an opportunity to move up that depth chart and do something? Can he be like an Edric Houston? Can he be like a Tyleik Williams as true freshman where, Tyleik Williams as a true freshman was a freshman All-American, so I'm not expecting that. But can you get some playing time? And the way Larry Johnson has talked about him, and I think the need at the position, they're really going to try to get him ready for that. So, we'll see. He's really, really explosive. I mean, you've seen him quite a bit. He's a fun guy to watch.
Yeah, he's got tremendous first step, tremendous get off, which again, you mentioned with Larry Johnson being a little unconventional in terms of nose tackle. Like I've said for years about Larry Johnson, it's all about get off. It doesn't matter if you're a weak side end, a strong side end, a 3-tech, a nose. If you don't have get off, he don't want you. So it is all about that first step, that explosiveness, and he does have that. And so, yeah, that's a good pick there. There's certainly going to be opportunity there along the defensive line, and someone's going to play along that defensive line for sure. With the young guys, I do like what they have coming back. It's interesting, not that Hero Kanu was going to be blocking him, but it does thin out things across the way there where maybe someone else now has to move spots. I know they've talked well about Jason Moore. That didn't really manifest itself last year. So we'll see. I think it's a big, if we were doing a, 5 players with the most to gain or lose this spring, maybe Jason Moore's on that list, but it'll be interesting to see, what the roster looks like. Like I said, when they still had Hero Kanu, I would always say like they like their young defensive tackles, and they still do. They like all the there's a lot of guys to like there, but it's one less guy to like now that he's moved on to Texas.
Yeah, and you're going to have to find somebody to play. And you brought in 3 defensive tackles. I will say, not that he's on the list, but Larry Johnson did talk about Trajan Odom being more of a developmental guy. So that might be a guy down the road to watch. But they need some of these guys to come in and at least pad the depth chart.
Yeah. And Odom is a big time upside guy. He's like 6'5", like 270 already, but he's kind of like Jason Moore in terms of his build, in terms of how he played in high school, and now what he's going to have to be asked to do in college. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one, I think, longer term along the defensive line. All right, so that was your number 3. My number 3, I'm sticking at linebacker because I just couldn't figure it out. So I'm going with TJ Alford, who I believe is a 5-star linebacker. I've seen a lot of him in person. I've been incredibly impressed with him. I don't know how they keep him off the field. He's getting in there early. Again, like Riley Pettijohn, I think he could play either linebacker spot for them as needed. I just think you're talking 2 guys who are basically 5-star out of state from, Florida and Texas, like the big 2. Even if all things are equal, you're going to have to play them anyway, because they're 5-star guys from Florida and Texas. And, they're going to be getting all sorts of crazy people in their DMs here in October if they haven't played yet about how they could come and be a starter at every other school in the country. But more than that, this is a guy who I think is ready. He's just so physical. He plays so fast. And I just think both of these linebackers are going to find their way onto the field.
Well, and you did the brave thing by splitting them apart. I did the cowardly thing by just making my number 2 a linebacker. And because I didn't want to differentiate between Riley Pettijohn or TJ Alford. Though if you only mention those 2 to James Laurinaitis, he's going to say, what about Eli Lee?
Yeah.
You better talk about Eli Lee. But I think both these guys, TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn, are going to be on special teams. That's, they're going to want them out there as well. But again, depth is an issue at linebacker as well, because when you're talking about, well, you've got your starters in Arvell Reese at middle linebacker, Sonny Styles at will. Peyton Pierce is probably the backup at middle linebacker. And then is CJ Hicks still a linebacker at this point? I don't know that we know that for sure. So that would put, Garrett Stover as the backup at will at this point. So there's an opportunity to make some noise there for both of these guys. And, I actually wrote about Riley Pettijohn a couple of days ago, and James Laurinaitis was talking same thing you said, his athleticism is off the charts. You can see him run from sideline to sideline or from hash to sideline, whatever you need. And he talked about how the ability to see the game from the second level, because if you can't do that as a linebacker, you can't play linebacker, which we've kind of seen with some other guys. So that ability, and when you watch it, he's a pretty patient guy as a linebacker and can get to the spots and get there well. And then TJ Alfred's so physical. And I remember watching him and James Laurinaitis like attached to hip at one of these June camps, and just doing everything, Laurinaitis doing everything he could to make sure that Alfred ends up a Buckeye. So those two are my collective number two, and they're going to be, like I said, I assume they'll be involved on special teams, but there's going to be an opportunity to get involved in the second half of games and the fourth quarter of games. Because again, Ohio State loved what they did last year and how they pieced out all of these snaps to everybody and got people opportunities to play. So they're going to do the same thing. They're planning on playing 16 games this year, and you're not just going to do that with the starters. So I'll be interested to see how James Laurinaitis splits these guys up in terms of reps, but also who is where, and how much, Mark, how much is there going to be a Sam involved this year as well? Because that could change the numbers dramatically.
The elephant in the room here is twofold. Is how much are we going to see a Sam? Are we going to see Sonny Styles on the edge with Matt Patricia? I mean, every time he lined up on the edge, he seemed to make something happen.
Yeah.
And I think when Matt Patricia goes back, I'm sure he's already done it, but like when Matt Patricia goes and looks at like this past season's film, that's going to have to pop out to him. Like, wow, this guy can, whether it's blitzing or lining up on the edge, this guy can get after the quarterback. And when that happens, you're going to likely be able to bring in another linebacker. So, like, I have two questions there. Yes, how many times are we going to see three linebackers on the field, and then how many times are we going to see someone like Sonny Styles kind of playing up in the front four, front five to allow another linebacker to get back on the field? So that is kind of the wild card in all of this in terms of how much we see these young linebackers, but I do think we're going to see them. So we'll get to my number two guy. I just, so much of this is just my being impressed with his ability. I do think there's some opportunity it's not like there's zero opportunity here, but I think he's going to kick the door down. Like, I don't think it's going to be one of those things where it's like, oh, we need someone to do this. No, I just think he's going to kick the door down. And that's Fahim Delane. I'm not going to go crazy and throw things out like Caleb Downs comparisons or anything like that. But here's what I will say. I like him more coming out of high school than Lathan Ransom. And Lathan Ransom was, by some services, a 5-star, was a top 50 prospect overall, and lived up to every bit of his high school billing. Very, 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 like, I would say a borderline great safety at Ohio State. I think Fahim Delane is a better prospect than Lathan Ransom coming out of high school. I think he has everything you would want in the modern safety. He can cover. He has instincts. He has ball skills. He's physical. He's got size. He's 6'2". Like, there's not much on a football field this kid can't do. And while I don't expect him to start, obviously, I do expect he's going to play. I think he's going to play more than people think.
If you go, like, not you, but after people watch this and listen to this, go watch his senior huddle highlights, and the dude is incredible. I've not stood next to him. I assume he's a legit 6'2", and he's rangy, but like, he can cover. There's one highlight where he's covering somebody deep, and then he flips his hip and turns and covers somebody else, like follows the next guy into the middle, and is a playmaker. So he's probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite guys in this class. I'm just wondering where's the opportunity. And I say that, and it's like, well, you've lost Lathan Ransom. The guy who is maybe starting is the backup, Jalen McClain, who's a true sophomore. You got Malik Hartford backing up Caleb Downs. This is a prime opportunity for a true freshman to come in and make a statement. And again, being here for the winter, being here for the spring, all of these things that you need to do, like both McClain and Hartford did, that allowed them to actually earn starts as true freshmen, mainly due to injury, but also because they were as equipped as possible. Like, I think that's what he's going to be as well. And, in terms of like guys that Ohio State has signed at safety, who matches like his potential, and when especially like right out of the gate. But I mean, you've been doing this a long time. Like, where does he stack up in terms of if things go as planned? Like, this guy is up there with anybody that Ohio State has signed at safety since Eugene Clifford. I mean, that's a good example and a bad example. But
yeah, my kind of gold standard is probably Von Bell.
Mhm.
Like there was a point where Jeff Okuda might have been a safety,
Mhm.
but that never material. Like they recruited him as a corner. He was ranked by some services as a safety, but like, yeah, my prototype's probably Von Bell. Does he run quite like Von? I don't know, but he's bigger than Von.
Well,
Von was skinny coming in, and he played, but he was skinny, and he wasn't 6'2", and like the thing with Fahim is he's really intelligent, which means I think he's going to be able to soak up both of those safety spots fairly quickly if they want him to. So I think he
even
could
with
play
Von
the
Bell, he played a lot of slot. Like Kerry Combs called him the slot corner, basically, in the defense that they had, and never. I think we got to see some of his range, like as a true freshman against Clemson in the ball game on Bell, but I think we didn't get to see as much as maybe like the NFL has seen.
Right.
But I'm with you on Fahim Delane. Like, I don't think there's anything he can't do, and he's got an opportunity to show that pretty early on.
Yeah. All right. Who's number one? We got the same number one. I'll just
yeah,
give that away.
That was the easy one. Devin Sanchez, cornerback. Even though I do like Ohio State's corners, and
yes,
assuming Aaron Scott and Bryce West continue to develop, but there's certainly an opportunity to come in and compete with those guys because you're going to be starting Davis Nigbenos and Jermaine Matthews. But we've also seen, I think last year was the first year we haven't seen a true freshman start at least one game at Ohio State in a few years because the guy stayed healthy. And also you had Jermaine Matthews there to step in as a sophomore. But Devin Sanchez, I mean, you've been doing this for a long, long time. I've only been going to camps for a few years, but just watching him camp in June and the way he moved, and like if you're not looking at his feet, it just looks like he's floating. You have to like look at his feet to see that they're actually moving. And he's big, he's long, and it's funny just watching like Tim Walton talk to him. It's like you could just see like the heart emojis coming off of him, basically watching him as a prospect. And there's again, you're going to be competing with two guys in Bryce West and Aaron Scott, basically to be that third corner. As Jermaine Matthews showed last year, if you play well enough, you can get into the rotation. You're not going to be locked out by two starters, two multi-year starters. They'll find a way for you to get on the field. And boy, he's Devin Sanchez to me is in a long line, although it's gotten maybe shorter, of guys who came in. You're like, this guy could play right away. And I mean, he's number one on our list for a good reason.
Yeah. Just kind of built in a lab, really. I mean, he can really run. He's 6'2". He's physical. He's fast. He's long. I think my favorite thing about him is he's hyper competitive. I think that's my favorite thing about him. He's hyper competitive. So he like takes everything. Like he's got like, he's got like Aaron Scott's length and Jermaine Matthews' competitiveness and like Davis and Igbenoson's size. And like, it's ridiculous. He's one of the best corner prospects I think I've seen. And like if Igbenoson had decided to not come back, I think we're sitting here talking about like, is he the favorite to start opposite Jermaine Matthews? But he's going to play. What they do with West and Scott, I think what they do with West is kind of the most interesting. I think we know Aaron Scott's probably an outside guy, but like Bryce West could play the nickel. I mean, they can. Some of these one of these guys could move inside and play the nickel, which would open up even more opportunity on the outside for Sanchez, who's going to be like your pure big outside corner. He's going to play special teams, I would imagine. And again, I think none of these guys are like all these guys are kind of like alpha personalities. That's how they are able to do what they do at the level they do it. but there's a little extra there with Sanchez. Like it's very much like I'm coming in to start, like I'm coming in to play. I'm not coming in to watch and learn. Like there's a very, very like hyper competitive mindset that he has. And that's probably going to get him into some fights in practice. And that's what we'd love to see, right? I mean, the guy used to fight the most of practice was like Michael Thomas and Eli Apple used to like just viciously fight at practice and then go out to get canes together afterwards. But like, that's how I think Devin Sanchez is going to bring some juice to that situation.
How would you compare that attitude towards the one that Jeremiah Smith came in with?
Yeah, that's the thing. Jeremiah is much more like about his bit. Like Jeremiah is more of a quiet confidence. Like if you ask Jeremiah like privately, like, hey, what do you think? Like he'll let you know. Like yeah, I'm coming into, but he's not gonna like bring it up first, you know, like Devin Sanchez is going to walk out there, like let everyone know like right away. Like
that's what corners have to do.
Right. Like I'm here, I'm starting. You better protect your starting position. I'm about to take it. Like I'm going to shut you down, Jeremiah. Like he is going to arrive right away with bad intentions.
Well, and that's going to be one of the things that everybody's going to be watching in the spring, not just him, but him against Jeremiah, because watching Jeremiah in the spring last year go against all of Ohio State's corners and making them look like he was so much better than everybody who had ever come before him, that's a challenge that all of those corners love, and I'm sure that's a challenge that Devin Sanchez is looking forward to. And yeah, he's what you designed. He's a creative player basically, and Ohio State's got him, and he's got Ohio State because he came to OSU for a reason, and Tim Moulton's not going to hold him back. Like go get it is basically going to be the message.
And you want to talk about drama free. When's the last time a 5-star out of Texas, just no drama, like committed like super early? Everyone's like, oh, let's see if this sticks. He never even like, there was like no talk ever of him wavering. Like just was their big ace recruiter, just the family recruits for Ohio State. Like it was almost shocking. You just, because even though he said all the right things when he committed, but you're just like, okay, like, you know, you're like the number one corner in the country. Everyone wants you. The idea that this is going to be like a tame recruitment for the next 12 months is hilarious. And it was, and it was. And so now he gets to go out there. It'll be interesting to see if there's like a Denzel Burke moment, and by that, I mean, you could put a hilarious how it started and how it's going with Denzel Burke with his comments on Jeremiah Smith, where it started out like, yeah, well, we'll see about that. He's a freshman, and then by the middle of spring, I was like, oh, oops, yeah, I guess.
I did that on the Buckeye Huddle Twitter account way back when, so it's like that's out there. Yes. You'll have to revive that. I'll maybe link it in the description box or something. But like, yes. So like, I'm waiting to see like if Cardell Tate or Brandon Innes or Jeremiah Smith, you know, have some maybe choice words if we meet with them in March, and then maybe what they're saying, you know, at the end of April or whatever. You know, it'll be interesting to see if we see a path like that. The problem is every team, every position should have somebody like Denzel Burke who tells you exactly how it is and does not hide anything. And that's why I've always said Denzel Burke is the arbiter of Buckeye truth. Whenever you want to know something, ask him. I don't know that everybody else is so undiplomatic, you know, like if you ask the receivers, they'll say all kinds of nice things, but Denzel Burke was always like, well, I need to see it. And then once he's seen it, he's like, yeah, that guy's good. I don't know who that would be. Like Brandon Innes is a good talker and will tell you how things are going. I don't know how much he's going to be matched up with Devin Sanchez though, being in the slot. Carnell Tate's pretty quiet guy. Jeremiah Smith is going to start coming into his own, being like, he's becoming more and more vocal. So maybe he can become that guy.
He does flip the switch. Like Jeremiah is a very quiet, like chill person off the field, but he does, like, you see when he scores touch, like you see when there is a switch that goes there. And so I wonder like if Devin's going to be able to like bring that out of him, even like draw that out of him. Cause he won't back down from Jeremiah in practice, and he may have some words, and that may, you know, we may see a little extra from Jeremiah than we're used to seeing, you know, if those matchups happen.
Well, and people keep talking about what is this spring showcase going to be, and one of my ideas just throw a bunch of one-on-ones with the receivers and the corners, and let it, because that's what Friday nights, that was the best part of Friday Night Lights,
Yeah.
was with the one-on-ones, where it's like you're just waiting for this camp to just get to the one-on-one. So some things like that where you can have some matchups that people want to see, and you can have, like, even Ryan Day, like, calling them out one by one, like, all right, let's do this. It's better than the circle drill where somebody might get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple things here as we wrap up, because we've done our top fives. We both had one offensive player, Quincy Porter. For me, I almost felt obligated to put an offensive guy on here. I almost, like, Zion Grady was like 5B for me if Quincy Porter was 5A. Like, I went back and forth, and really the tiebreaker for me was simply, can I really put a top 5 out there without a single offensive player? That just is not the greatest thing for purposes of discussion. So they were kind of a tie for me at 5, but like Tony said, like, the opportunity on defense is just so much greater this year. I mean, first of all, with offense, like, offensive line is like the last position pencil guys in at. Even like a Paris Johnson, Saul. I mean, he played as a freshman, but like, he's like the freak of all freaks, and he wasn't like an instant impact guy. So like, you kind of cross out the offensive line right away, and then it's like, well, it's not going to be quarterback because they've got their 2 guys in their battle, and we'll get to that in a second. But like, so it's like, okay, where, it's not going to be tight end. They brought in Max Clare, like, Jelani Thurman's bat. Like, where are we going here? And so I couldn't decide on a running back. Like, clearly none of the freshman running backs are going to be in the top 2. And with Sam Williams-Dixon coming back, that kind of cemented it for me. Like, before, if Sam Williams-Dixon hadn't come back, maybe I just, like, gun to my head, let me throw one of these out there, like a Turbo Rogers, because he's a little bit different than the other running backs and could maybe get in on some gadget plays. But it was just really hard to find offensive players.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is something that is what I mentioned earlier in the show, a relative impact. Like Bo Jackson, could he do what James Peoples did last year and be that number 3 running back, but you carry the ball like 40 times? Is that and really none of those carries come in moments when the game is on the line. So what kind of impact is that? It's like, sure, you're still doing all of the things in practice, giving the defense good looks, but we're talking a relative impact here. And, even like Carter Lowe could move his way into like the 2 deep, like Ian Moore moved his way into the 2 deep at right tackle as a true freshman. But is that the kind of impact that we're talking about? Like, if we're doing a top 5 offensive list, like, maybe these guys make it, but you have to understand that it's a relative impact. And Ian Moore, anytime you can get a true freshman offensive lineman to work his way into the 2 deep, you'll take that. Now, it doesn't mean you want them playing, but if they're good enough to be in the 2 deep, that's great. Ideally, they're going to redshirt, which he did, and develop, and then year 2, year 3, something like that. But if they're good enough to work into the 2 deep, that's great. I think some of that was also injury related with losing so many tackles. But the offensive line, like, that's what you went to the portal for in terms of getting an impact out of any of the signees. And I'm with you on the running backs. Is it Bo Jackson, Isaiah West? They're kind of maybe more similar than Turbo Rogers is. And I know Carlos Loughlin loves Turbo Rogers and what he can do. But I even had, like, I put a list of 5 guys together. I had Nate Roberts last in terms of, like, well, they played like 5 tight ends this past year. Could he be the 5th guy? And if so, like, that's about as big of an impact as I can find from the rest of the list, because I don't know that many of these guys are going to play that much. And Tavian St. Clair, to get to him, like,
yeah, that's the elephant in the room, that we didn't have him on our top 5s.
Right. And the thing is, like, Julian Stain redshirted. Nobody expects him to, like, be here for 5 years. Tavian St. Clair will probably redshirt. Nobody expects him to be here for 5 years. But it's like, when do you find time to play these guys? The funny thing is, like, he could play 4 regular season games and start in 4 playoff games and still redshirt, because the playoff games and postseason games don't count. But if he is impacting this team, that's either a very bad thing or a very good thing, and maybe not a very bad thing. It's just like, could all 3 of these guys could probably lead Ohio State to the playoffs, depending. But it's not something you're expecting from him. Not that it won't eventually happen, but it's not something you're expecting this year. At least I'm not, and you're not.
Yeah, like just to reiterate what we said at the top, this isn't our 5 best players in the class. If we were ranking the 5 best players in the class, I would have Tavian St. Clair in the top 2 or 3, with Devin Sanchez and probably Fahim Delane. But I just they're going to give, like, he's going to get his reps because he's kind of the de facto 3 right now, unless they're not going to. I mean, doesn't look like anyone's coming in before spring ball, so it's like, he's going to be the de facto 3 until at least they break out of spring, it sounds like. And then they'll decide, I guess, if they want to bring in a Chug 5.0 or whatever we're on now. But they're going to give so many reps to Sayin and Kienholz. Like, those are the guys. They'll say the right things about St. Clair in press conferences about, like, oh, he's going to get a look too. But they're really giving Kienholz and Sayin the spotlight here. And I think they're going to give those guys just tons and tons and tons of reps. And again, if you get down to your 3rd string true freshman quarterback, that's usually not it's usually not because the true freshman quarterback kicked the door down. It's usually because injuries happen or some type of horrible, like, inconsistency from your veterans with Julian Sayin. But, like, I don't see the path to, like, meaningful snaps this year. I see a path to a lot of cleanup in the 4th quarter, possibly. But even then, like, let's say it doesn't matter. Whoever wins the competition, I expect it's going to be Sayin, but it may not be. Aren't you, as long as like this team's in the playoff hunt, aren't the garbage reps going to go to the backup to keep him sharp? Like, I just don't know how. Like, I'm sure he'll get an end of game series here and there, but, like, let's say you pull your starters in the middle of the 3rd quarter and Julian Sayin's your starter. I tend to think Lincoln Kienholz is going in the game to keep him sharp.
Yep, and that's kind of what happened last year. Even Julian Sayin threw 12 passes last year as the number 3 quarterback, and Devin Brown only threw 20. But you're not coming in to throw the ball at the end. He came in to just manage the game and get the game over with. So, like, I think it's interesting when you have these 2 guys competing, and Lincoln Kienholz, I just wrote about him on Tuesday at BuckeyeHuddle.com about how now he is the oldest guy in the room as a redshirt sophomore, and yet he didn't throw a pass last year, and he hasn't thrown a pass since the Cotton Bowl game where he was, I think, 6 of 17 with the reshuffled offensive line and no Marvin Harrison. So it was not a fair opportunity, for him. But Julian Sayin came in last year and beat him out, and that last year was Lincoln Kienholz's first spring. This will be his 2nd spring. I do think it's interesting, like, when we talk about quarterbacks, and we don't ever like to throw people into the transfer portal, but it's the way of the world with the quarterback position. And since Ryan Day came to Ohio State in 2017, and not that Tate Martell was his, but he has signed, I believe, 9 quarterbacks since he's been offensive coordinator. And the 2 of those 9 that have not transferred or did not transfer, CJ Stroud and Lincoln Kienholz. And CJ Stroud left after 3 years. So, like, no, I think Kyle McCord, nobody has actually been here, stayed for 4 years. Devin Brown almost did it, but, like, it's like 3 years and gone. And this is Lincoln Kienholz's 3rd year. And so if you don't win it, eventually you've got to decide, am I going to stick around for a 4th year and try it? But, like, if you get beat out by somebody who's younger than you, especially at quarterback, the thing that happens is that guy leaves. And so we'll see. But also, it's a 16-game season. If things go well, the idea, like, what are the percentages that a starting quarterback plays all 16 of those games? Ohio State got very lucky last year. Georgia did not.
Yeah, no question. And, like, I bring it back to you said 12 passes for Sayin last year. Like, I really think, again, you're going to want to get, because they're so young, you're going to want to get the top 2. Like you're going to want to keep throwing the ball. You're going to want to keep getting these guys reps. You don't have Will Howard and his, however many games of experience under his belt that you had last year. So you have two guys who do need reps. And I tend to think, again, that they're going to stick with those two for all meaningful reps. And then maybe St. Clair gets again, whoever's the backup comes in whenever they pull the starters, and then they get them all the way down to maybe the 3 to 5 minute mark of the fourth quarter. And then maybe St. Clair gets a series, but let's play this game. You said Sayin had 12 pass attempts, over under 12 pass attempts for Tavian St. Clair.
I will go over. And part of me thinks maybe it's because he is the backup quarterback because of the transfer portal. And the thing is, and again, I hate putting people into the portal, but Lincoln Keenholt said, I'll have to see how spring goes, and then we'll see what happens after that. There's not going to be a starting quarterback named after spring. I hate to spoil things.
No.
So whatever they tell Lincoln Keenholt, it's the same thing that Urban Meyer told Joe Burrow. We can't name you the starter, but you're still going to have an opportunity. And it's whether or not Lincoln Keenholt is okay with that answer or not. And so that decision has to be made. But if they go into if they finish spring and they end spring and there's only two quarterbacks on the roster, you've got to bring somebody else in clearly. And so maybe that guy would then be the backup. But I think I'll go over 12. But I don't feel great about it just because it's not typical. And Lincoln Keenholt says the third quarterback in 2023 only got over 12 because he threw 17 in the bowl game.
Yeah, I'll cheat a little bit. And if Lincoln Keenholt is still on the roster in the fall, I'll say under 12. But yeah, he may not be. And in that case, St. Clair may be the backup, which that's a whole other show on what you do there. How do you weigh, okay, Julian Sayin is a redshirt freshman, is our veteran. So how do you weigh getting him as many snaps as possible deep into games versus, we can't get this guy injured?
Yeah, because you can't follow the same blueprint that you did with CJ Stroud because it's a different game now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that'll be very interesting. It'll be interesting no matter what the look of the room is. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the quarterbacks. I personally think they need to bring in a veteran quarterback no matter what.
I agree.
But it's hard to find Gunnar Hoax. Everyone's probably laughing about that. But it is actually hard to find someone who's going to transfer into your program who is somewhat capable of a football player, but is also perfectly understanding that they're not going to be the starter and that they're kind of just there to babysit the younger players and provide some veteran presence and maybe never even get into a game. So those guys are hard to find because most guys in the portal are looking for a place to start or play. So it's not always easy to find those guys. But I think they should bring one in anyway, just kind of insulate things. But we'll see what they do. So that's our explanation, our long-winded explanation for why Tavian St. Clair was not in our top 5. Again, we both feel, I think, very highly of him and his future at Ohio State. But just in terms of impact in 2025, I think there's some other names to watch first. So any final thoughts, Tony?
Again, I think the good news is that you don't need a lot of these guys to have an impact. So any kind of impact that they do have is a bonus. And, that's because of the depth that they have and the fact that you can bring guys in through the portal, transfer portal to bolster some of those areas that you don't need to rely on freshmen for. But that doesn't mean some of these freshmen can't step up. And I think we've seen guys do that in the past, even if they could get something like a Jermaine Matthews, out of Devin Sanchez or something like that, where he was a very good third and fourth corner and was able to come in and start. And because the more they play this year, obviously it's going to help next year when so many of these guys are going to be called on to be starters.
Yeah. My big takeaway from doing this list was that it was very difficult to come up with offensive players. And it was very difficult to rank the defensive guys because there were 7, 8, 9 defensive guys I could have put on this list because there's way more opportunity on defense this year, given what they've lost and what they're bringing back on offense. But, look, this is the first time that I can say in a long time. I don't want to, I'm not going to throw out a year because I don't want to go back and be like, oh no, but like, this is the first time in at least a few years, maybe even longer, that I look at this recruiting class and I say they did much better on defense than offense. And that's not that they didn't do well on offense, but historically their classes have looked better on offense than defense. This year was the opposite. This is a ridiculously good defensive class. Mm-hmm. And so those were my takeaways as we went through this. But yeah, I think we've made our point. 45 minutes. Hopefully everyone enjoys the discussion. Let us know in the comments actually where we were wrong, where we were right. Let us know who your impact freshmen are in the comments, and we'll be sure to double back and chime in, maybe have some discussion there. But yeah, let us know who you expect to make an impact as true freshmen this fall in the field. And check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Check Tony out on the Buckeye Weekly podcast. You just dropped one?
We dropped one on Monday talking about the possible college football playoff expansion to 16 teams and the Big Ten and SEC demanding 4 automatic qualifiers, because how else are they going to survive without their automatic qualifiers?
Yes. Possibly ruining they have this great thing, and possibly we have to quickly ruin it. But yes, check that out. It's a good discussion there from Tony and Tom Moore. And again, BuckeyeHuddle.com for all of your pre-spring information, recruiting coverage, everything else you need right there. Thanks everyone again for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.